the COO of Atmosoft, a development as a service company. Today, I wanted to talk briefly about some of the technology involved in the automotive stack, um, and just kind of go over some of my experiences and some of the areas where I'm seeing there's room for opportunities in the space. So, just kind of a brief overview of the technology side that I've worked on as far as automotive goes. I worked for a company that does extended warranties that you buy when you purchase the vehicle. When you're sitting down with the finance manager and they ask you if you want to add additional protections onto the vehicle. Some dealerships, Toyota, Honda, I think they have their own version of these products, but a lot of dealers will partner with external entities to sell extended warranties and provide vehicle coverage for windshields, appearance, the leather, external products like the clear plastic coating that goes over the front of your car. Those type of things are usually considered add-ons and get added on to additional price of the loan. So when we look at the overall architecture of how that system works and how third parties are able to integrate in with the dealers, we're dealing with three distinct areas. One, you have the uh, management dealer management system, or DMS, that is running in the dealership, and that is what drives all the functions of the dealership and where the integration happens. Then once you're purchasing the vehicle and they're gathering up all your financial information and sitting down, make sure you qualify. You're going through it's called the F&I process. So that's where you're getting the financing for the vehicle, and that menu then connects to a provider. The provider is, for example, some of the providers are Stone Eagle, F&I Express. Uh, um, we call them PEN. I think that stands for the Open Exchange Network. And what these providers do is they provide the connection to the DMS. So they take, however the DMS is configured to work, it queries the provider, and then the provider transforms that query, or transforms that request, or what you're looking at. It's usually, in most cases that I've seen, it's usually an XML document. So they're going to transform the XML document to, for example, to fit an extended warranty company, and then they're going to send that request over to the extended warranty company. And then that request is going to come back. They're going to do the transformation again, and then they're going to provide that information into the DMS. So we have the dealer management system. We have a third party provider, and then we have the providers that sit in the middle, and then we have the third party offerings, which are wired into the providers, which are then wired into the dealer management systems. So some of the technology stack that I've been exposed to is a little on the older side. So the majority of work that we've done, again, I'm not harping on legacy systems. I love legacy systems if they're working and you don't need to do update. You still need to baby it. You still need to give it attention. But I'm in no way advocating switching off a product that is working and performing its function for the business. It's just as we progress as an industry, there are some lessons we've learned that could possibly be applied in this space that might make things a little simpler. Currently, a lot of the technology stack is still using a SOAP and XML, at least based on the experiences that I've had. So there's a lot of XML documents getting exchanged, and a lot of SOAP authentication, and we've kind of moved out of the SOAP world and more into the REST world, which REST with JSON is going to be a lot more compact. It's going to be a little bit smaller, and you're going to get some more readability benefits, and it's kind of becoming kind of like the industry standard for exchanging of data. Again, all the other protocols, there's nothing wrong with them. They work. and they continue to work, that's great. However, my preference would definitely be to exchange data via JSON versus XML. So there's one opportunity there. Some of the other issues that we've encountered in the industry as a whole is sometimes it can be difficult when you have to work with kind of a middleman, right? So, for example, if company A wants to add a new offering, then it's got to be coordinated with the provider so that they can do the work on their end and they recognize the data that you're sending back so they can transform it correctly to be fed into the dealer management system. There's a little overhead when you're working or you want to create a new product offering. Obviously the level of complexity scales as the more people that need to be involved in getting a particular product or a particular product group out and ready to be launched. When we're looking at the industry as a whole, we're kind of using, and I don't want to use the word outdated technology, but a little bit. We're still using SOAP and XML, and we're consuming, web services rather than REST endpoints. We're doing things with WSDL, and we've got XML documents, and what qualifies as the correct XML document. And there's a bunch of I'm sure on the provider side, there's a bunch of XSLT that's used to do a bunch of transforms, and then you got mapping built into the middle there, and really all the it seems like all the players kind of in the middle that are connected directly to the dealer management system, all they're kind of doing is doing the transform space. And where I was going with this was eventually we were working with the provider, and the provider basically told us that their system is not capable of pointing to a test environment. I was thoroughly surprised about this. I mean, it's 2023. I think we've established that having somewhat flexible, I don't want to say flexible environments, but being able to support where your environment is pointing really shouldn't be that difficult. So, for example, if I have a web service and I'm calling, and the URL is, api.somerandomcompany.com, or www.somerandomcompany.com/API, and I'm consuming data from that endpoint. Our systems should be at this point in time able to be like, okay, yeah, we're going to get the same data, but we need to pull it from this test environment. I mean, it's literally a call, and I don't have any inside knowledge about what's going on, but it's literally changing uh where you're pointing. The data you're pulling back is still the same, the documents are going to be the same, and I don't know, maybe the people we were working with didn't understand what we were asking for, and we need to provide clarification. I'm trying to be as fair as possible, but it just seemed like we we've been out of the space of having a very challenging time. I'm pointing to different environments. I feel like we kind of, as the industry, kind of evolved out of that space a little while ago. So it's surprising in 2023 to see those types of issues still occurring. And again, I'm not saying system works; it's doing what they want to do. Maybe they just don't want to spend the money. I mean, there's 1,000 different reasons on why that may not work for them. But it was just kind of surprising to kind of get that feedback. So one thing I'll point out here. So when you're designing a system, if you're consuming external resources, you should design your system in a way that those external resources can be swapped out. Now, I'm not saying let's say I'm downloading zip code data. Okay, so I'm gonna go download. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go query this endpoint for some zip code data. I'm not saying you need to code up your solution to. Uh, I'm not saying you need to code up your solution to to support every single possible endpoint that provides zip code data, right? But if I have if I'm going to go to one URL for a particular resource, and that resource is I'm getting zip code data, and so I'm going to go query that resource. Where that resource is located should be external to your running environment. That could be an environment variable that you set. That could be a config file. That could be whatever, where you can tell your application you're going to get the same data structure back. But I want you to go to test, or I want you to go to staging, or I want you to go to, I want to consume the production level environment. So when we're thinking about data consumption, as both as an industry, as an architecture, as a software developer, you want to think about adding up just a little bit of flexibility in there on particularly on where you point to. And I know with XML and namespacing that can be a challenge. So I understand, again, trying to be nice, because I mean I don't have any internal knowledge of what's going on. This is just what I'm seeing from an external perspective. So you can see that the environment, realistically, we should be able to, at a minimum, support running against test type environments. Okay, because sometimes these new product launches for these third party providers for dealerships can be complicated. When it's this vehicle, do this. When it's this old, do this. When it has this mileage, do this. When we're selling in Florida, when we're selling in Washington, when we're selling in California, there's a lot of exceptions to what you consider your base set of standard rules. And a lot of companies in the space will, create specific products that are focused around those exceptions. For example, maybe you only sell your product to consumers in Florida. Like, you're licensed and you've got all your legalese, and you want to sell your third party product, and you want to sell that, and you only want to sell it in Florida. And then later on you expand out and you're like, okay, now we're going to support, the other 49 states, and so we're going to expand out, but we still need to keep these, there's legal requirements, and we still need to keep these Florida specific rules. So when you're implementing a complicated third party option or product, you do need to go through testing, and I don't feel like in this day and age it's okay to say, oh, we'll just run against production using the test account. Like, that is an option that we provided for this particular problem that we're speaking of, but it's not an ideal situation, because sometimes on the background with these new products we could have, database changes that we don't want to roll out till we know we're good. We could have, file changes, structure changes, API changes. We could have a lot of things that we want to make sure that our integration, we're done with development, everything looks right, but we want to make sure we're testing at the integration level, and we want to make sure that, at least from the integration perspective, that we're solid before we roll those changes into production. Because you kind of force a situation where you have to strongly consider the roll forward option, which is a good option. When you're deploying to production, the roll forward option is always a valid solution if you have a particular problem, and depending on your scenario. If you have a complex release structure, then you're most likely not going to roll forward, because you already rolled into test, you already rolled into staging, and now you're rolling into production, and that's just going to be by that point in time you can be not 100% certain, but fairly certain that your code and the organization around your code has, if everyone's done their job correctly by the time you release production, the chances of you going or running into kind of a roll forward type scenario is not going to be large, especially if you have now I want to use the word onerous, but if you have a complex release process, right? The reason why it's complex is because you have values that you want your product or your developed code to meet, and you want to make sure that you're not, violating any of the core values of your company. So you have a very structured, very rigid release process where everything is tested, everything's, automated, tested, and then you got these processes. Smaller and medium sized companies typically will have at least one or more of their developers, or a kind of network engineer developer hybrid that will assist with release. Me personally, I can do most things in production. There's some advanced server configurations that I'm not 100% up on, but I can release a database, I can set up a VM, I can configure SQL Server, I can restore databases, I can back up databases, I can do a lot of what I consider a general production developer can do. Because in scenarios, a lot of times there wasn't a supporting team to help me do a release, so I kind of had to figure out all that stuff on my own. That's not a bad model, right? If you have one or two developers and one or two network engineers, in the smaller businesses, you're going to wear more hats. And so I like it. I don't have a problem being in production. I understand the importance of production. I understand what I should and shouldn't do, and I understand that I need to be very, very careful when I'm working in production. So ideally you want to test those integration endpoints. You want to test that integration before you go live. And for a company, or for a product to either not be able to, or internally they don't want to be able to run against a test environment, was fairly surprising. I know in general, I mean, when we're dealing with SOAP and XML, that's been around since, just guessing off the top of my head, probably late 2000s. And so it's a technology that's been around for, by my guesstimation, over 20 years. I remember when XML became a big thing. I've been doing this for a long time, and everything was XML, XML. It was a great time in the industry, and XML did solve a lot of problems, but it started to add a little bit of complexity, and you could see some of that complexity being removed when we moved to the REST API JSON combination endpoints, right? We still got all the important features, authentication, which you get with SOAP and web services, and then service discovery, which you get with WSDLs, from your from your ASMX files, and we removed some of that complexity, and we went down to, a simpler object notation format, and a simpler kind of exchange format, which, me personally, I like. I like it. I think simple is oftentimes, probably a better approach. Instead of making things more complicated, you kind of take the core. Like, XML is a great idea, but this JSON REST exchange is kind of building up on top of that, and doing lessons learned, and extracting, again, like an XML, SOAP specifically. You can send in an authentication header, so the request gets automatically authenticated. But then you're in your headers, you're sending over basically your username and password. It's okay over SSL. However, ideally, I would want some other authentication method to happen in front of my actual integration with the API. So that could be something like OAuth. CAS is one that I've done recently. Just those type of Google authentication. just those type of hey, Tasha, thank you. Those type of where do I want to go? So those type of optimizations happen, and then you look back and you're like, yeah, XML was cool, but now this other technology, I feel like it solves the problem better, and that's okay, because we should always be trying and striving to evolve, both as people and as an industry. Let's find that sometimes feel like the nature of human beings is to find the optimal path for all the problems in the universe, right? Like the most optimized paths. Our brains are wired for both optimization and efficiency. I think about it all the time. Like, can I write this code faster? Can I solve this problem faster? Can I do this, better than the next guy? And that's kind of a driving factor, I think, behind human nature. But not, you don't have to jump on the bandwagon like right when something new comes out, right? Take for example, Blazor, right? WebAssembly and web sockets, right? These are great technologies, and I like web sockets because you have like it's like instead of picking up the phone, making a phone call, hanging up, calling them back, asking for the next thing, hanging up. You just keep the pipe open, and you can get real time updates and real time streaming on your channel. It's a neat. It's a or sorry, I shouldn't say neat. It's a good protocol. I think it'll pick up more in the future, but I wouldn't tell a client jump on the WebSocket bandwagon right now. Like, I mean, if they wanted to use WebSockets, if there was a use case for WebSockets, I would say let's do WebSockets. In the future, it will most likely not even if it continues going in the trajectory it's going now, it won't even be a conversation. Everything will just be WebSockets, right? You'll just open up connection to the server, you'll just be exchanging data back and forth, and then we'll start optimizing around that. And that real-time connection, always keeping it open with the server, may become the norm for the majority of websites. But right now, I wouldn't tell a company to jump on WebSockets just because they want to do something, and I'm gonna be like, oh, you have to do this in WebSockets. That's not true at all right now. Same thing with XML, right? Like if your business and organization is built around XML, you can take these staged, staggered approaches to. You don't have to move away from XML, but you need to open up to the other possibilities of maybe I'm going to exchange data with these 5 people, and we're going to do it in JSON, and we're going to test it out, and we're going to add something in here that maybe sits in the front end, takes the JSON, turns it into XML, and then feeds it into the rest of the system. But now we've added support for JSON, so now you can connect to us with XML, and you can connect to us, and we'll exchange data with you in JSON. Nothing about the system internally has to change, but it can evolve now, right? Because you have that endpoint, and now you're supporting JSON, and then all of a sudden you have this new feature, or you want to come up with this new way to describe a warranty, or a new way to describe a vehicle, or some type of product offering that you have, and you can go in and you can and you can say, okay, we're going to do this new piece, and it's just going to speak JSON. Right? And so, or you don't even have to limit it like that. I mean, however your organization wants to or needs to spend the capital to get the feature set that you want, that's definitely the path you should go down. But I'm just saying, so moving forward in the future, our system is already starting to kind of evolve in a JSON direction. Do you see the evolution there? So we had this big system. Everything was built around XML. Maybe XML is a core part of the system. Maybe you're not taking the XML right at the front and then transforming it into data objects. Maybe you're working with XML all the way down the stack, right? Everything you're doing, you're passing around chunks of XML documents, or you're using XPath and XQuery. I would recommend that if you're doing new work. I would say get to a DTO, or what I like to call model or data transformation object. I would say get to that as quickly as possible. So if I have an XML file coming in, and let's just say the XML file is from we'll say company Z is the name of the company. So company Z is sending me XML, and this XML is kind of specific to company Z, but there's a lot of elements that are the same. So like when you're working with vehicle information, right? You have a VIN, you have a make, you have a model, you have a year, you have a customer who owns that vehicle, you have and that's the basic. So I'm gonna start designing my system with that idea in mind, that I have a product object, and that product object is going to be composed of these kind of used everywhere. All the customer information: city, state, name, first name, middle initial, last name, address, city, state, zip. Right? That's common. That bit of information you're going to get from everyone. So if I was architecting it, I would create a base model object that just has that information, right? There's nothing specific to a given product or an offering that you're going to be exposing to the DMS that requires some specialty. or some specialty work or some specialty properties, right? But then we start adding on like vehicle information, right? That's gonna be the same for everybody across the board. We're gonna have a VIN, we're gonna have make, we're gonna have model, we're gonna have year, maybe we have mileage, odometer. We're going to have that set of information. That's going to be common. So I'm going to put that into my common object as well, or my common model. And then when we get into specific items that are coming into your XML, then I'm going to create an object that is based off of that. It's called inheritance. And so I'm going to create an object that is based off of that already has all those customer properties and the vehicle properties, right? Those are two nodes in the XML that we've been talking about. They're all going to be the same. And so I'm going to create it. But when we're talking about products offered by an individual company and the differing items that have to go with that, there's probably going to be a company Z data transfer object, or a company X data transfer object. So I'm going to take in my XML. I'm going to read everything from the XML and the object. I'm going to do all my validation on the XML. I'm going to make sure my objects are good, and I'm going to use the objects in the rest of the system, right? But going back to our example, we were talking about if we had XML wired all the way through, right? So we're just passing around, Xdocs and C# or XML objects in Java, or in Python. We're just passing around the XML document. And so we're passing around fragments, and we're querying it, and we're pulling values when we need to, but we don't have this layer up top that's kind of doing the parsing and getting us into kind of a model space, and then we pass down those data structures that are not XML, right? We're kind of attached to the XML all the way down. Well, when we add this JSON feature, and we start working with JSON, and we start seeing these requests coming in like, oh yeah, I'd rather connect up to the JSON REST endpoint. I don't want to use SOAP anymore. I want to migrate away from it. Maybe it has a security issue, or I don't know of any off the top of my head having to deal with SOAP and XML, but I can imagine there's some probably in there. That stack is pretty complicated. And so as we start to lean heavier on that JSON is going to start kind of bleeding through uh, through our architecture, and we're going to start handling JSON in more spaces. So instead of keeping this rigid XML, we're going to be like, okay, here's an opportunity where we can work in some JSON. So we start forcing kind of an evolution, a systemic evolution, as we add on these new features and we add on these new interfaces, and maybe the XML starts to get pushed up kind of in the translation layer, right? So now we've worked in some JSON, we've worked in some XML, we've pulled the XML out of the code, out of deep into the code, right? So we're working with models down here. So we pulled that up, and then we pull up the JSON, and the JSON's converting into a model object, the XML is converting into a model object, and then we're flowing those model objects down to the rest of the system, right? And so we're kind of slowly evolving the system to not be as XML centric, and that allows us to adopt newer technologies. Let's say for some reason, we'll use the WebSocket example. Let's just say for some reason you decide that you want to get you have a product that you're selling that has to have real time pricing. I mean, the pricing is so volatile, kind of like stocks, that you kind of lock in, and that's kind of the price you get at the time, right? And so you need to get real time information on the product, because you got pricing, and you want to do it real time. We'll just say that's one of the requirements. Okay, so now you build up that WebSocket layer, and you put that up kind of on the top, and the systems are connecting to you. Now we have support for XML, we have support for JSON, and then we have support for WebSockets, right? And again, you're gonna take the data on the WebSocket, and you're gonna try to architect it so you kind of got this little piece here that's kind of working as a translation layer, and then The rest of the code doesn't even know about WebSockets. The rest of the code can just take the model objects, or if we went back and didn't do the JSON work first, it could know about XML, and then when we get the WebSocket information in, we're converting it into XML and then feeding it through the rest of the system, right? So there are ways to take a legacy system that's running on older code. I don't like the term outdated because I think everything has a time and a place. But it's definitely legacy. It's definitely old, and it's definitely been around for a while, and that's part of the reason why it's still around, because it works. And so I wouldn't want to go in and just, oh, everything has to be JSON. We won't take any more XML. Maybe that's not a business requirement that's reasonable for your business. Maybe you have to continue accepting XML while everyone upgrades. But if you think about, kind of breaking apart your architecture, and then if you think about, enabling it so it's not environment specific, so that you can point in different directions. I 100% understand that if my test environment was giving you back data that was inconsistent with what I would be returning in production, that's a whole different ballgame. And that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here is basically, where am I consuming the data from? I'm consuming it from test, or I'm consuming it from production. The data structures and the XML and everything that gets returned is 99% the same. It should be easy for you to configure a test environment so that you can work through integration with organizations that you're providing or partnering with. To say that we can only connect to production, and you have to give us a test login that you now have to code into your system to ignore all the stuff that's pulling in, is I think it shows where we have some opportunities in the industry, in the space, to improve it. Again, not saying replace it. I'm saying that we can start taking steps to improve the way that our systems work and function. So, um, I just wanted to kind of chat about some of the stuff I've seen in the automotive space, and some of the ideas around where I think that there's areas where we could improve. If you're a dealership or a dealer group, if you're looking to have someone come in and help you do some technical evaluation, we at Atmosoft are happy to come in and take a look and see if there's areas where we can help you. I think the industry as a whole, maybe as we kind of go through this economic slowdown, everything's slowing down, maybe is the time now is to kind of take a look and see where we are technical wise, and then kind of expand out and see if there's areas and rooms for improvement, where we can introduce some of the newer concepts that we've found in the development industry, and kind of make the whole work through the whole interoperability between all the systems, and kind of get that streamlined down a little bit. I appreciate your time, everybody. I will be back tomorrow, and I hope everyone has a great day. And let's get at it. Let's get it done. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.